أهلا بكم مشاهدينا الأفاضل في هذا اللقاء الخاص الذي نجريه مع سفيرة المملكة المتحدة في ليبيا كارولين هرندل. أرحب بك سعادة السفيرة على شاشة ليبيا الأحرار.
شكرا.
أنت موجودة في طرابلس منذ سبتمبر الماضي. خلال هذه الأشهر كيف تجدين طبيعة الحياة في طرابلس؟
أحب الحياة في طرابلس. الجو أفضل كثير من البريطانية، والثقافة والتاريخ في ليبيا، ونعم أحب الحياة والناس في ليبيا.
كيف يمضي روتين يومك هنا في طرابلس في ظل هذه الظروف المختلفة، هذا الظرف اللي يعيشه البلد الآن؟
في الحقيقة كل يوم مختلف. في أي أسبوع عادة أجتمع مع فريقي في السفارة والسياسيين والمجتمع المدني، وبالإضافة إلى ذلك أقول مع زميلي وزملائي في لندن كل يوم. أحيانا أزور أماكن مختلف حول المدينة، كل شيء في دعم الاستقرار والتقدم في ليبيا.
ترتبون مع الخارجية بشكل سلس الأمور في ظل حالة عدم الاستقرار التام في ليبيا الآن. هل هناك أي مصاعب تواجهونها في تأدية عملكم؟
لا. الوضع الأمن صعب قليلا، لكن عمل مع وزارة الخارجية جيد جدا.
تلاحظون أن هناك مشكل أمني في البلد؟
Yes, there are obviously security issues in the country. I think there has been a lot of progress since the signing of the ceasefire 2 years ago. But there are still obviously security challenges that we want to work with all sides in Libya to try to overcome.
طيب، سأعود معك لمناقشة كثير من الموضوعات المرتبطة بهذا الأمر، لكن دعيني أبدأ معك الحوار بالسؤال عن خطوة إعادة فتح السفارة في طرابلس. ماذا بعد هذه الخطوة؟
So we have had a presence back in Libya for several months now, but we wanted to reopen the embassy to formalise our activity here in terms of our work with the different political sides, our work with civil society groups. We are working closely, for example, with the British Council. We support a number of students who have been able to go to England over the last many years. Since 2000, we've supported something like 160 students study in the UK. And so our opening was a way of formalising that presence here and demonstrating that we really believe that Libya can progress and is on a path towards stability.
هذا الذهاب إلى الأمام يواجه مصاعب كثيرة الآن، وخاصة في الفترة الحالية. كيف تساهم المملكة المتحدة في دعم مسارات الحوار الآن الساعية إلى إيجاد حلول؟
I mean, you've said exactly what needs to happen. It's dialogue. We know that there is a lot of conversations taking place between different political leaders and different groups. The talks in Cairo, for example, whilst they haven't come to a full conclusion, we think they've been successful in making progress. And when I talk to politicians and leaders from all sides, my main message to them is to continue to talk to each other and to continue to put the interests of Libyan people first, to try to get the country on a track towards elections.
فيما يتعلق بمباحثات القاهرة، اعتبرتي أنها لم تصل إلى مستوى النجاح؟ في تقديركم لماذا لم يتحقق هذا النجاح؟
I mean, I think they have had some success, the talks in Cairo, and I really applaud the efforts of the members of the committee and also of Stephanie Williams, the UN Secretary General's Special Advisor, because they have worked really hard to reach as far as they can. And I know that those conversations are continuing between the two bodies and also the leaders of the two bodies, the chairman of the High State Council and the Speaker of the House of Representatives. So actually we do see progress, and now it's really important that that progress is not lost and that that dialogue continues so that a constitutional basis for elections can be found.
مع استمرار الحوار لسنوات دون تحقيق النتيجة الأساسية، الهدف الرئيسي من هذا الحوار، كيف يستمر الإيمان بأن هذه الحوارات ستنتج حلول في النهاية؟
I think I look at the last few years in Libya, whilst we haven't reached the milestones that perhaps were hoped for over the last 2 years, there has been progress. The ceasefire has been maintained. For example, the coastal road was reopened, and when I speak to Libyan colleagues and friends, they do say that life is getting better. And so for me, I think that shows that if the politicians and leaders are able to put the interests of those Libyan people first, it should be possible to reach agreement on the way forward.
لكن كل هذه المطالب ظلت موجودة دون أن تحقق أي نتائج. اليوم ما الذي تغير حتى يمكن أن نقول أنه يمكن الاستمرار في التعويل على الحوارات كسبيل لخلق حلول؟
To be frank, I think dialogue is the only answer. We have seen many times in Libya when one or more sides resort to trying to use violence, it doesn't work, and it only has an enormous negative effect on normal people's lives in Libya. So whilst it is difficult, that dialogue must continue. I think compromise needs to happen, and perhaps an acceptance that no one is going to win everything. There needs to be compromise, as I said, putting the interests of the Libyan people first.
شاركتم في اجتماعات 5+5 في تونس. كيف تقيمون هذا المسار؟
I think it's a really important track. The work of the 5+5, which we support, and obviously the UN supports very directly, has been crucial in taking some of the first steps. For example, the first steps towards the ceasefire. I know that they facilitated and helped work on the reopening of the coastal road. And more broadly, I think their leadership towards the reunification of the armed forces in Libya will be hugely important. And I think the other thing I've been really impressed by is, even though there are political difficulties, that committee has continued to meet and is committed to working together, which gives me a lot of hope.
لكن على ما يبدو دون أي نتائج ملموسة. مسألة فتح الطريق الساحل وما إلى ذلك هي دون طموحات الليبيين، البحث عن توحيد المؤسسة العسكرية، عن وضع قيادة موحدة للجيش الليبي. كل هذه المسائل ظلت قضايا عالقة لا يمكن وضع حلول لها. هل بإمكان هذا المسار بعد كل هذه الفترة الطويلة التي لم ينتج حلول خلالها أن يصل فعلا إلى وضع حل لهذه الإشكالات؟
I think it can. I think we have to be patient. But for example, we have seen meetings between generals from the east and the west looking to work together. So step by step, I believe we will see progress. But ultimately, you're right, there needs to be more progress on the political track, because I think for issues such as reunification of the army will make the most progress after there have been presidential and parliamentary elections, and there is a government that can be fully sovereign and that can lead that process of reunification of the army and of different institutions.
الآن هذه المسألة تقودنا للسؤال عن طبيعة موقف المملكة المتحدة من الوجود الروسي في ليبيا. هل ما زال مستوى الاهتمام بوجود فاغنر في ليبيا في نفس المستوى بالنسبة لديكم؟
Absolutely, we are very worried about this. I think we can see, including through Russia's actions elsewhere in the world, for example in Ukraine, Russia and the Wagner Group are prepared to use force for their own interests. I don't think Wagner Group or Russia have the best interests of Libya at heart, and I think ultimately they don't want to see Libya become more stable. And again, if we are able to achieve progress on the political track and on the different elements of the armed forces working together, I think that will help. As they assert more control and more authority over Libya, there can be no reason for Wagner Group to be here.
لكن على ما يبدو الصوت الدولي بدا خافتا في الفترة الأخيرة فيما يتعلق بالمطالبات بخروج فاغنر من ليبيا والقوات الأجنبية بالعموم. كأن هناك نوع من تراجع الحماس بشأن هذا المطلب.
if that voice has gone down, it definitely doesn't reflect any less interest. I think at the moment we're really focused on working with Libyan leaders, Libyan institutions, to have them lead the process. So we are continuing to be very active, but perhaps if you haven't heard us talk publicly about that, I wouldn't draw too many conclusions from that.
في الفترة الأخيرة راج حديث عن أنه يمكن أن يكون هناك تحرك دولي للتعامل مع وجود فاغنر في ليبيا. أنت الآن تقولين بأن التعويل بالدرجة الأولى هو على القادة الليبيين لوضع تصور لمعالجة هذه المشكلة.
Yes, I know that there's some rumours around of this sort of thing, of either the UK deploying forces into Libya. I want to be really clear that those rumours are not true. We want to see a politically led solution in Libya and support all the institutions that are working towards that.
زرتي بنغازي قبل فترة، التقيتي بخليفة
Very
حفتر.
briefly.
هذا جاب التزامن ربما بقرب مشاركتكم في اجتماعات 5+5 في تونس. هل ناقشتم مسألة توحيد المؤسسة العسكرية مع حفتر؟
Yes, absolutely. I consider it my job as the UK ambassador to meet with all sides that can have an influence and can play, if they choose to, a positive role in Libya becoming more stable. And that was my message to Khalifa Haftar, was that he could play a role, an important role, in seeing that stability in this country. And yes, I believe we talked about the need for the reunification of the armed forces as well.
كيف تصوركم لهذا الدور بعد ما حصل في 2019 والحرب على طرابلس التي قادها حفتر؟ موقف المملكة المتحدة كان واضح في تلك الفترة. الآن عندما تقول بأننا نؤمن بأن له دور فيما هو قادم، كيف تتصورون هذا الدور؟
So look, let's be very clear. Any attempt, as we saw in 2019, to try to resolve Libya's problems by force is totally unacceptable, and we were really clear at the time about that. And I'm really clear all the time with either General Haftar or the people around him, and people we speak to here in Tripoli as well, that there can be no military solution. It's been proved there can be no military solution here in Libya. So what I say to him is I urge him to use his influence to achieve dialogue and compromise, again, for the good of the people living here in Libya.
كيف تتعامل حكومة المملكة المتحدة مع وجود حكومتين اليوم في ليبيا؟
It's a real problem, and again, we see that it doesn't help progress if there are two parallel institutions. I believe it makes it harder for us to work, but also essentially it's not a good thing for the Libyan economy, for progress and for stabilization. And so I think there is a need now for, again, all those different leaders across Libya to work together to compromise to see if we can move beyond and return to a more unified government.
هذا ربما يقدم موقف غير واضح فيما يتعلق بوجود حكومتين. موقف بريطاني غير واضح على ما يبدو.
I think we're really clear that the existence of two governments is unhelpful. We have worked well with the Government of National Unity. As you said, you know, I talk regularly to Foreign Minister Mangoush and to Abdulhamid Dbeibeh, and Mr. Bashagar is someone with whom the UK has a long relationship with. And I have said very clearly to anyone that I meet that I think that, again, putting the interests of Libyan people first should lead all of those people to compromise, to agree a more unified government again, to be able to move forward.
هذا يعني أن مبدأ التعامل يتم على أساس أن هناك أطراف متصارعة حول السلطة الآن في ليبيا، وليس مسألة أن هناك حكومة وحكومة موازية.
Exactly. And essentially, yes, we talk to most leaders, again, to try and urge that dialogue and compromise.
طيب ماذا يمكن أن تقدم المملكة المتحدة لتجاوز العقبات التي تمنع إجراء انتخابات اليوم في ليبيا؟ ربما حل كل هذه الإشكالات يمكن معالجتها من خلال الذهاب نحو إجراء انتخابات تكون محل قبول ورضا من الجميع. هل لديكم تصور لشكل دعم ما يمكن أن يسمح بإجراء الانتخابات؟
So there are different things we can do. For example, through the UN Development Programme, we provide support and funding to the High National Elections Commission. We can use our relationships and our political influence to encourage progress towards elections, and as I said, to encourage the establishment of a constitutional basis for elections. But if I'm honest, my vision and the UK's vision for Libya really comes from the people I have met since I've been here. As you said, I only arrived in September, but I talk a lot to civil society groups, to youth debating organisations, and all sorts of groups. And they see a Libya in the future that is stable, where they can prosper, they can move around easily, and they can live their life to the fullest. And I think you're right. Allowing those people the choice of their own future through elections is what we want to support. So as I said, there's technical support, there's funding, and also working with different groups to really show that the Libyan people want elections and want to help move the country forward.
تدعمون البعثة الأممية في مساعيها لحل هذه المشكلة. تقدمون تصورات، هناك ما يمكن أن يعتبر تيسير عمل البعثة مقدم من قبلكم مثلا عبر التواصل مع أطراف أو غيرها؟
Yes, we work very closely with UNSMIL. I think the vision is a joint one that was embodied in the roadmap. Now, as I said, even though the deadlines haven't been met, the fundamentals within that roadmap of what is needed, a basis for elections, a unified government to focus on delivering those elections, is what's needed. But more broadly, I think, to say a little bit more about our vision, there are tremendous opportunities for trade and cooperation, and for the UK and Libya to work together in the fields of education and in health. And I just think there's wonderful opportunities for both our countries in the future. That's really my vision.
لماذا وقع التمديد لبعثة الأمم المتحدة لأكثر من مرة لفترات قصيرة دون الاتفاق على تسمية مبعوث أممي خلف المبعوث السابق؟
It's a difficult one. I think that it's no secret that Russia is prepared to use its role on the Security Council to make it harder to achieve peace and stability, and to make it harder for the Security Council to fulfill its obligations in terms of supporting greater stability and progress in Libya. So yes, there have been difficult conversations and difficult progress. I think UNSMIL plays a really important role here. So I hope that as we come up to the next mandate renewal and conversations around a special representative, we may see a better, more constructive role.
ما زلتم تتوقعون أن يحدث الصلح هذا مع أن فشل لأكثر من 3 اجتماعات لمجلس الأمن الدولي؟ هل فعلا موسكو تعارض تسمية المستشارة ويليامز كمبعوثة أممية؟
I can't speak for Moscow, obviously. I think the progress that was achieved the last time was, as you might know, the Secretary General issued a report last year around some changes that could be made to the UN mission to make it even more effective. And during the last mandate renewal, those changes were put into effect in the resolution. So I think that is a step forward. And now I'm sure there are lots of conversations taking place in New York about who should take over as special representative.
كيف يمكن أن تكون البعثة أكثر فاعلية دون وجود مبعوث؟
I think the team in UNSMIL is working really hard, and again I pay tribute to the efforts of Stephanie Williams to really focus on facilitating dialogue. So there's a lot they can do still, but I agree with you that it's really important that they have strong leadership continuing. So look, we're just going to carry on trying to achieve this in New York.
السؤال الأخير في هذا الموضوع، تتوقعين أن يتم تسمية المستشارة ويليامز كمبعوثة في ليبيا في وقت قريب؟
I don't know, and these are all conversations that take place in New York. It's important that I don't speculate, I think, because it would make things harder.
طيب، في تقديرك ما هي أسباب فشل البعثة الأممية والجهود الدولية في الوصول إلى حل دائم في ليبيا؟ كل الحلول التي تم تقديمها عبر البعثة أو بدعم دولي كانت حلول مؤقتة لم تصمد كثيرا.
I don't think UNSMIL has failed. I think they are working hard and that we have seen progress, especially in the last few years, that UNSMIL has supported in terms of maintaining the ceasefire and the talks that have recently concluded in Cairo. And I suppose what my real view on this is that it's the responsibility of Libya's leaders to reach consensus, to make compromises, and to establish a vision. So UNSMIL can support that, and the international community can help facilitate that dialogue, but it's for Libya's leaders to take responsibility.
أنتم تتوقعون أن التقدم الجزئي هو نجاح نسبي على الأقل بالنسبة للبعثة، لكن توقعات الليبيين تفوق هذه المسألة. هناك طموح لدى الليبيين بأن أن يكون هناك إمكانية للوصول إلى حل كامل ودائم في نفس الوقت.
I think it's a step forward, and I think more progress was made in these talks than we've seen before in really establishing agreement between the House of Representatives and the High State Council. And so we should build on that progress now, because you're right, this is just one step towards that vision and the aspirations of Libya's people.
مطلعون حول حيثيات هذا الاتفاق، أن هناك أطراف تعارض من داخل المجلسين، أن هناك أطراف تختلف، أنه لا يوجد موقف موحد داخل كل مجلس.
I mean, what I'm aware of is what I've heard both from the UN and what we've heard Stephanie Williams say is that real progress was made, that final issues still need to be discussed and agreed, and so I would echo her call for the leaders of those two institutions to meet as soon as possible to finalise those agreements.
يرى البعض بأنكم كنتم شاركتم الليبيين في 2011 في إسقاط نظام القذافي، لكنكم لم تكونوا شركاء في مرحلة ما بعد القذافي. ربما حتى هناك نوع أو شكل من اللوم يوجه للمجتمع الدولي، يوجه لدول كبرى مثل الولايات المتحدة، مثل المملكة المتحدة، فرنسا، إيطاليا، غيرها، على أنها مارست دور الشريك عندما كان العمل على إسقاط القذافي، لكن بعد ذلك لم تمارس دور بنفس الصيغة، صيغة الشريك.
So it's very difficult looking back at the history, but I think the action that was taken by the UK and other allies, as approved by a Security Council resolution, was to prevent an escalating crisis and to protect civilians that were potentially under the threat of attack. Since then, again, I think you're right. We could spend a long time unpicking what happened, but I do still believe that Libya's leaders need to step forward and take responsibility for progress and for re-establishing security across Libya now.
بما أنك تقتربين كثيرا من الأوساط العامة هنا في طرابلس، لاحظت هذا الشعور موجود لدى الليبيين أن هناك إحساس بأن المجتمع الدولي تخلى عن الليبيين بعد 2011؟
I hope not. It's a difficult one for me to be able to speak for Libyans, but I hope what they would see now is that the UK is here, we've reopened our embassy, and we're really determined to be here and work patiently in the long term to support Libya.
تتوقعين مستقبل مغاير ربما لما كان عليه الوضع في السنوات الأخيرة؟
I hope so, yes, and I expect so. Again, as I said, what makes me think that is when I speak to young Libyans and different civil society groups and organisations that, despite the challenges of recent years, are still determined to put Libya onto a better footing. And I think if we can support them, Libya has a good future.
طيب سأختم معك بسؤال في الجانب المالي والاقتصادي. هناك مساهمة بريطانية واضحة في جهود ومساعي توحيد المصرف المركزي الليبي، لكن في من ينتقد هذه السياسات البريطانية بأن المملكة المتحدة أو حكومة المملكة المتحدة تركز على الجانب المالي في ليبيا أكثر من الجانب السياسي والأمني والعسكري.
Okay, I mean, I don't think that's a fair criticism. The central bank is a really important sovereign institution that contributes a lot and could contribute more to the health of Libya's economy. So it's an important institution that we want to see reunified, and I'm pleased that there is a British team from the company Deloitte working with them. But we don't just work on the economy. As I said, we work closely and we encourage all of the different political parties. But we also have a lot of other projects running. So we work with groups across the country on governance. We support demining organisations that are clearing unexploded ordnance from conflict-affected cities.
لا يبدو هذا العمل بارزا بنفس المستوى اللي يبرز به دور المملكة المتحدة في دعم مسار توحيد المصرف المركزي والجانب المالي والاقتصادي المتعلق بالبنك المركزي.
I think it's one of those things that takes time and ultimately again needs to be led by the leaders of the central bank. But I think there have been steps. You know, there was a report that set out what needed to happen, and yes, you know, we carry on encouraging the central bank to work towards reunification.
الجانب المالي مرتبط بمشكلة الحقول النفطية وإغلاقها، والنفط في ليبيا هو المورد تقريبا الوحيد بالنسبة للاقتصاد الليبي. هل هناك دور للمملكة المتحدة في محاولة تجاوز المشاكل المرتبطة بإنتاج وتصدير النفط؟
Sorry, I'm not sure I understand the question totally.
إذا كان هناك دور للمملكة المتحدة في محاولة دعم جهود حكومية، جهود رسمية لمنع حدوث إغلاقات في القطاع النفطي.
Absolutely. Absolutely. I mean, I think essentially this is back to the political issues, and I think my main hope is that all sides don't continue to use oil, which is a resource that should be for the benefit of all Libyans, as a political tool. Especially at the moment, you know, Libya should be able to benefit from its ability to export oil. So I think ultimately this is again part of the political issue, but we see it on all sides. No resources.
لكن للأسف هذا لا يحدث الآن. فيما يتعلق بالميزانية، ميزانية الدولة الليبية، الآن مع وجود ميزانية للحكومة المكلفة من مجلس النواب، هناك حديث عن إمكانية تسليط عقوبات على المصرف المركزي الليبي في طرابلس في حال لم ينفذ هذه الميزانية. هل هذه مسألة واردة؟ عقوبات دولية؟
I mean, sanctions is always a tool that the UK is ready to use if we see people blocking the peace process in Libya. But I think what I want to be really clear about is that, again, the issues around the budget, the oil blockades, concerns around use of funding from the CBL that's not being properly used, all of this stems from the political problems that we see, the parallel institutions and the competition for power. And that's why, for me, I always come back to the need for Libya's leaders to commit to dialogue, to commit to resolving those differences and getting us back on a track towards elections.
لا تتوقعين، وهذا سؤال أخير طبعا، لا تتوقعين أن يكون هناك ضغط دولي على المصرف المركزي لتمويل الميزانية المعتمدة من قبل مجلس النواب؟
As I said, I think that what there is international pressure for is for the issues that are created by parallel institutions to be addressed by Libya's leaders coming together to try and reunify, establish a more unified government again, and then work from there.
وهذه سياسة عامة يتبعها المجتمع الدولي تقولين. أشكرك في الختام سفيرة المملكة المتحدة في ليبيا كارولين هرندل، شكرا جزيلا لك.
Thank you very much.
والشكر موصول لكم أنتم أيضا السادة المشاهدين، في أمان الله تعالى.